This is Otaku Station, broadcasting anime analysis to anyone who will listen. We have a basement archive full of an ever-growing collection of anime media. We dig deep into the great anime of the past to give you the context you need to fully appreciate the best this medium has to offer. Let's jam. Welcome to the broadcast. I hope you're having a good day wherever you happen to be right now. This is Otaku Station, where today we'll be talking about the 7th episode of Anne of Green Gables, the anime adaptation. If you've been following along the past few weeks, you know we've had some problems here in the tower. Fortunately, the signal that Mito sent last time allowed the authorities to track down our mystery hacker, and he is now captured and under arrest. No more hacks, hopefully. Apparently he has some kind of vendetta against anime? Who knows? Anyway, I've let everyone who's been to the tower know that we're back up and running, and they can stop by whenever. Meantime, I've been gathering my thoughts about this Anne of Green Gables anime, and I want to talk about how it adapts the novel specifically. It's a really interesting case study, so let's head to the research room to look into that now. So how did Isao Takahata adapt the novel? This series is 50 episodes long, and the novel is a few hundred pages, not exactly infinite jest in length. Also, Takahata avoids narration most of the time, so the inner thoughts described on the page usually aren't depicted directly via dialogue or like hearing their thoughts echoing, right? So what did he do? Well, he does really three things that are really effective in adapting the novel. The first is using symbolism and imagery to show us Anne's inner thoughts and emotions. You see this when Anne realizes that Marilla and Matthew will keep her. She sits down on the couch and is then surrounded by nature and flowers. That's not literally happening to her. That's what's happening inside her head. And we know this represents her feeling good because we know how much she loves nature and this is her happy place. So you use that to take words in a novel and put it visually on screen. Now, in terms of length, he does a couple more things. So the second thing Takahata does is he takes scenes described briefly in the novel and expands those with full dialogue, sometimes rearranging moments in the scene to make that happen. For example, when Anne is being returned, that whole sequence is rearranged and expanded from the existing scene. The girls are not in the yard playing in the original book, but adding that in adds another layer to the scene and helps us think more about the scene, and also just increases the length of the scene, just straight up. And I think it's a very appropriate and effective way of filling out the story, right? So stuff like that where you get scenes kind of expanded out, more dialogue added, but it's the same content, right? It's going to the same place. It has the same fundamental meaning, and it's going in the same direction. We're just filling it out and expanding it. He also adds just whole new scenes and, in some cases, whole episodes. However, these do not add new characters or subplots. They bolster what's already there and feel like just another standalone chapter of the novel. So, for example, Anne running off from the horse and buggy when she's being returned, that whole sequence is not in the novel, but it's a very understandable thing for Anne to do at the time, and it helps us understand more of A, Anne's emotional state, and B, Marilla's feelings about Anne, that she's starting to feel bad for Anne at this point in some way. And then also seeing more of Marilla's potential parental approach, right, where she doesn't scream at Anne, she doesn't run after her, she kind of patiently waits for Anne to compose herself. Now, this is helped by the novel's existing structure of distinct chapters. Montgomery really liked writing novels where each chapter is relatively standalone, kind of works as its own little mini story. And so they could add whole episodes that felt like just another chapter in the story where it's just more adventures of these characters. So it's, in terms of this particular novel, that was a good thing to do because it fits the structure of the novel anyway. So yeah, those are three things I think Takahata did really well. Using symbolism and imagery to show us Anne's inner thoughts, expanding scenes, and then adding whole new scenes and episodes as appropriate to this particular story. So, did a good job, I think. Welcome back. I hope you found that useful. Quick update. A bunch of people replied to my message and said they're going to stop by, which is lovely. I've gone down to the garden and pulled some corn, some tomatoes. Tomatoes aren't very big, barely basketball sized. Anyway, before we get to the episode, a few things to watch out for. The first is why Anne would lash out this strongly in response to Rachel's remarks. A response is understandable, but this is quite the response. Secondly is how Marilla parents Anne in this situation. And then third, the idea of appropriate consequences for Anne's behavior. Like, do you feel like the way that was handled by Marilla was effectively done? So yeah, let me get John and Steve on the line and we'll talk about more Anne of Green Gables. All right, I think we are back up with John and Steve. You guys ready for more Anne of Green Gables?
All set.
Why not?
Indeed. So, as you recall from last time, Anne had been accepted into the Cuthbert household. So they are going to keep Anne. And I now need to correct something I have been speaking improperly on. They speak in the show and in the book of taking on a boy and taking on Anne, not of adoption. I.e., they are bringing a boy to live with them, but the intent was not for him to take on the Cuthbert name, for example.
Oh,
right.
okay.
Not a legal adoption. And that is the language they use here with Anne, where we're taking you in, you will live here, and presumably she would take over the house if everything works out that way and she doesn't poison the well. But this is not adoption, is not the main intent of the situation.
So it's more akin to like fostering.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Well, and also this is of an era when you're practically an adult now. You're not that far away from adulthood, and so they're taking somebody in with the intent of them taking over the place fairly soon. Relatively speaking. Not to spoil anything, but they later talk about college and like you're going off to college at 14.
Wow.
Schooling ends at 12, basically, right? So very different kind of age expectations around this stuff.
So it really is more like taking on a hired hand.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Although without like compensation, the compensation being room, board, clothing, etc.
Yeah.
Okay.
And to be clear, they recognize they're taking on a child, right? There's going to be the expectation of schooling and raising up. This is not a mature person they recognize, but it's not adoption in the way we think of it.
Okay. I'm glad you made that distinction because I thought it was adoption. This whole time been operating under that understanding. It's like, oh, they adopted her. Like, I didn't realize there was that option.
Yeah. Not the main intent here. Okay.
Very good.
Let's get into Anne. As a reminder, Mrs. Rachel Lynde is the neighbor. The one who came over and was like, I can't believe you're bringing on a girl. Or a boy at the time. Let's note the tone of this opening. How gentle it is. How it feels like everything's kind of normal now that Anne is here.
Are we in spring?
I believe, actually, we are in summer, I believe, late summer.
I was going to say, because Bonnie is not blooming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Bonnie is just a tree.
Yep. And I know that because they say this at some point here that, actually, no, it might be, No, it's late spring, because they mentioned at some point that there's like 2 weeks left in school,
Okay.
and so they're not sending Anne to school because what's the point?
Very good. I love how Matthew really doesn't want to gauge Marilla, and then he's like, "Oh, really?" Just shuts the door and walks out.
No, hi, bye. See ya.
Yeah, I hear a fire. I gotta go. Like, jeez.
No one will get this, but I hear a mountain lion.
Yeah. Gotta leave. To Bonnie being in spring coming colors, that also it feels like, okay, Anne she's now staying at Green Gables, and this is spring, so it is a rebirth.
Yeah.
So
True.
Anne is now being reborn as Anne of Green Gables.
Exactly. Yep. I'm assuming her clothes are being laundered. She's wearing kind of the basic dress and no socks or shoes, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you use the word adopt here? Again, I'm not sure if they mean that broadly, because I know for a fact that throughout this she is never known as Anne Cuthbert. She's known as Anne Shirley.
Right.
So, unclear. It should also be pointed out, I'm not sure what what the different options were back then as well, for adoption or taking on whatever. I don't know.
Well, say a translation
True.
issues could be very easy as well, where it's
Yeah.
easier to say adopted than to be like she was a sponsored foster child, and blah blah blah. It's like, say adopted, just cut to the chase.
Good point.
As I say, thank you, Marilla, for that admission.
Yeah.
That's not, you didn't just shove it off on Matthew. Oh, Matthew liked her. It's like you actually own some of it. Wow, way to open up the door a little bit more on your emotional state.
100%. I also love how Marilla is frank with Mrs. Rachel Lynde, where she's not impolite, but she's like, no, that's incorrect,
Yeah, for someone who is as aware of her sort of position, Marilla seems to be very, very upfront with her neighbor.
Yes.
Versus being like much more delicate in her statements. It's like, oh no.
I just like how her neighbor fell ill, but still had the ability to gossip and tell Marilla, well, this is what the town has been saying about you.
There's a quote.
To which Marilla goes, yeah.
Yeah. There's a quote from the
No
next
more surprise
novel.
than me.
Yeah. If you went to your own room at midnight, locked the door, pulled down the blind, and sneezed, Mrs. Lynde would ask you the next day how your cold was.
Wow.
Further to your point, John, this is admitting a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Notice how it's not to Anne.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It's to somebody else. Don't tell Anne that.
Excuse me. Also note kind of the side glance, a kind of thoughtful, reaction here where Marilla's processing a bit more. Rachel said this 2 weeks ago, so come on, she knows this.
What we've learned from this journey so far is that Marilla is not the type of person that would take someone telling her she can't do something or she doesn't know something.
True. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, neighbor lady, no, back away from this because you're thinking to tell Marilla her business. And it's like Marilla's face gives you a good indication of exactly how she feels about being told that. Like, really? Like, oh, I would duck. There'd be a slap coming in here somewhere if it wasn't this show.
Mrs. Lynde, that big red sign that says stop does apply to you. So please just...
Why is Rachel surprised at that? Because she expected to be able to tell that Anne was here. Right? If Anne was inside the house, she would be able to tell because Anne would be bouncing all over the walls.
Right.
So she's assuming Anne is, 3 counties away, basically. I'm assuming.
Is she assuming that Anne would be at school?
Maybe. That's possible. Yeah.
Because if this is, the end of the school season's coming, maybe she, without asking Marilla, maybe she just assumed Anne was sent off to school somewhere and is not here.
Good point. Yeah.
Or she could be in total grips of terror, just going, "It's going to eat me. It's going to poison the well and eat us all."
Child is here. Oh no! Wow.
Yeah.
Come on, folks. Good Lord.
Yeah.
It's a little girl.
But notice Anne's reaction, right? She's all happiness. Then she comes in, she sees a stranger, and she immediately retracts into herself. She's trying to be good and polite. I have to pause on Anne's righteous rage at this moment.
I mean, it almost feels like she's going to say, "You want me to be a demon spawn? Fine, I'll be a demon spawn. Here we go. Prepare for this ride."
If it were Looney Tunes, it'd be steam coming out of her ears.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, think of when she was going to be given back. And that lady who comes up the lane and is just like, well, and she's looking over like, and we discussed, looking her over like she's livestock.
Yep.
Anne couldn't do anything at that moment because she didn't know what was going on. She didn't know how things were going to go. But Marilla has said, "You're staying here. You're with Matthew and I, and everything is, you're now here with us." So finally, Anne kind of has a little of that. Just shut up and just don't show any emotion. Just try and bear this. Now she has an actual opportunity to be like pissed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To be upset that somebody's treating her. Oh, you're homely. Oh, look at you. You're dirty. Like,
now, I will say, kind of in Rachel's defense, not to defend her, but in her mind, she's talking to Marilla, and then going and say, "Come over here," So, and you see it in her expression. Like, she smiles and beckons Anne over when she's talking to her directly, but then makes these comments to Marilla, as would often happen kind of talking over children. Again, not appropriate, not good, but I think that's where her mind is.
Children should be seen and not heard, but still, wow, just.
Yeah. Now, important note here. Anne's kind of freaking out. She's also responding. Anne has never had anyone to speak up for her. And so she's had to do that for herself. She's being her own mom here, right? I'm sure there have been lots of other situations in her life where somebody's spoken ill of her or somebody, and she had to step up and defend her or somebody else. So this is that sort of maternal instinct, if you will, in her, coming back out to defend herself. It's a little much in the moment. Like, it's this... But I think that's where that's coming from, is that she's never had anyone else to do this for her.
Right. Well, I think also, too, we're at a point in this story where, again, she's had a weight lifted off of her. So she can finally say these things. And she, it's a little unhinged at the moment, but this isn't just the next door neighbor lady. This is everybody to this point that has spoken down to her, has talked around her and above her, and just ignored her as a person, as a feeling individual.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, it's interesting to be at this moment that Marilla did not immediately grab her and yank her back.
That's true. Yes, you're absolutely right. Well, in contrast, where Anne's been, she's been happily playing. She did her chores and went out and did her stuff. And very politely, doing the work. Can I go out and play now? Yes, great. She's very happy. She comes home, and now somebody has crashed on her paradise.
Yeah. And I do wonder if Marilla, even though she says Anne, but she doesn't immediately snag her, if this isn't in some small part Marilla being like, yeah, you're right. Yeah. She's a nosy busybody, and she irks the hell out of me. So, oh, you're such a bad girl, Anne. I'll give you a cookie later.
Anne is just relentless in this.
Yeah.
She just doesn't know when to stop. But also note the escalation. Right, you've hurt me worse than anyone's ever hurt me before in my life. Like, wow. Oh.
But it's also, to Anne's credit, any of us that have ever argued with a parent, and you get a little upset, you get caught in the emotion.
Yeah.
There gets to be a turning point when you're going off, where you start saying things that are kind of like explanatory and exculpatory.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, Anne, you've hurt me worse than anyone has ever hurt me before. Not like that time with the drunk husband and blah blah. So it feels a little like, okay, I'm bringing it back down. Now I'm telling you why I'm just unloading on you, so that you'll be like, what a horrible. Oh, she had a horrible experience as a child. Be like, here we go. This is kind of dancing a little bit on this. Like,
true. And I think to your point further, she's not just saying, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you 1,000 times over. She's saying, I hate you, you did this, you wouldn't like it if this happened to you. She's really talking through and explaining what's going on with her as best she can. That said, this is a very extreme reaction.
Yeah.
Like there's and especially for a button-down conservative Christian community like this, to say, I hate you, I'll never forgive you, all this kind of stuff, that's beyond the pale. So it's not just I feel hurt, it's very extreme.
So she'll be checking the well a few times during the next few days.
Well, I mean, it certainly is in keeping with Anne's flights of fancy that she has flights of anger. So.
Yeah. Well, this is speaking to a larger, deeper psychological element of Anne of Green Gables, and kind of the story as a whole, is that Anne is a boat on the ocean, right? And the ocean is sometimes very placid and calm and beautiful, and sometimes it is 50-foot waves. And the problem is, it can be 2 seconds between placid waters and 50-foot waves. Like, she is going all over the place at all times. And this is really making us see very clearly that Anne has not just no control over her emotions, but that her emotions just completely sweep her away, to an unhealthy degree.
Yeah.
I really appreciate Marilla's response here, which is, Anne, go away. We'll talk about this later. We'll sort this out. I'm not going to, bend you over and paddle you right here, anything like that. Just, you go. Moving on. Then we'll figure out the next step.
Yeah, because again, I secretly feel like Marilla is kind of in there with this argument, because her initial Anne could have ended it. Anne, go to your room. Go to your room. We'll talk about this.
Yeah.
She let her go all the way out. Where it's like, okay, way to go, lady.
I do think
she's like, I'm going to give you this 60 seconds to see where this goes.
I do think Marilla is more shocked than anything else here, especially because we've seen Anne being very obedient up to this point. And so this is, a very early, wow, not what I expected. There we go. So Marilla being very clear-headed about the situation.
Well, also her initial response.
Yeah.
The socially aware and buttoned-down Marilla would have said, sorry, go man. I'm so sorry for that. This has been so disruptive. Yeah. And she corrects herself. Go man. No, hold on. This is actually your fault. Like,
pretty much.
Nice.
Yeah.
So this is actually Marilla disproving her thesis that she doesn't know anything about kids. I mean, she doesn't. Marilla doesn't.
Right.
But there's something about Marilla that common sense of just like, no, she was wrong. She was naughty, and we're going to correct that. But in the meantime, you know what? I'm not happy with you either.
Absolutely. Like, the fact that Marilla is able to look at a situation and say, you're both wrong, that's great.
Yeah.
Although still kind of shocked. Like, look at that expression on her face. She's still a little blown away by all this.
Yeah.
Well, and what other time before Anne arrived in this, what other time has Marilla and Matthew ever had to deal with this kind of, community discord, if you will?
True.
You know what I mean? And so this is all new territory in so many different directions for Marilla.
True.
I gotta say, Matthew would have laughed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just get that sense that if Anne had unloaded, Matthew would have just laughed at the situation
Yeah.
and been like, "Oh,
Matthew
gotta go
would-
to the
Matthew
barn,
would-
bye."
Matthew would have been like, I'm so glad I have this bushy mustache. No one can see me smiling.
Yeah.
But also, to that point, Steve, about Marilla grasping this, her understanding that Anne has never been taught what is right. You know, that deeper problem
Yeah.
that Anne needs direction. You know.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, as far as we know, this is Marilla's only friend.
Yeah.
Right.
And Marilla's sticking to her guns.
Well, I think it's a very interesting show that when push comes to shove, this woman's not really Marilla's friend.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not angry with you. I just feel sorry for you, basically.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, so you're 10 children with 2 that you lost, which is a tragedy. That, the question has to be asked. Have you just felt sorry for me? Because I live here with my brother. I have no kids. Is this pity? Are you taking pity on me? Which is very telling. You know what I mean? That's not a good friend.
Yeah. And I also appreciate Marilla just letting that play out, right? Where she's like, okay, this is how you're going to act, and I'm not going to continue an argument or anything like that. You just do that. And again, to be to see things in a sort of broader perspective, I think also Rachel's just kind of blowing off steam a little bit. Like, she's going to calm down and realize, okay, this is not the worst problem I've ever had. And so Marilla's giving space for all of that.
Right. Which I imagine Rachel, in her anger, it also feels like some embarrassment.
Sure, yeah, true.
You know what I mean? Because you've been called to the carpet by a young child.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
And, this is Rachel kind of pointing out, if this is the kind of reception I'm going to get, this isn't a very comfortable situation. It's like, fair. Like, if you do have a wild kid running around, yeah, I can see that.
a little bit of karma.
Yeah. Is that another Miyazaki stumble?
Ooh.
Right? Where often his characters will stumble if they're kind of off the path a little bit, or they're trying to find something that could be. But also a little humor. So it should be pointed out, this is the first time Marilla's going to have to, really correct Anne, seriously. And this is a time period where you could expect to be told to go out and break off a switch.
Yeah.
Right.
And some serious punishment could come out of this.
Corporal punishment was the norm, not the
Yeah.
exception.
Right.
Note that Marilla is responding to Anne in kind, in the best sense.
Yeah.
Anne saying she had no reason to do that. She says, well, then you had no reason to do what you did. It's getting to the heart of the matter in a way that Anne can understand.
Right.
Who
And
came
she
to you?
didn't refute anything that happened.
Right.
You know what I mean? She's not like, well, she didn't mean to say that you were ugly. She didn't mean to say you
True.
were redhead. No, she
Right.
did not refute that statement. She's just saying one wrong wasn't met with another wrong. That's not how you do that.
Anne reacts to Marilla and says, it's different. Anne turns around. Marilla waits. She's not, probing further or anything. She's letting Anne just kind of talk it out herself. Quite wise. I love how Takahata staged this too, where Anne can't look at Marilla anymore. Anne seems to understand that she's a little ashamed of herself. And so she has to turn and look out the window. And we don't see Anne either, which I think is kind of a blessing in this moment. Like, we don't want to see her, breaking down.
Yeah. Acknowledging that Rachel is the gossip of the neighborhood.
That's true, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
Now we get to peek into the emotional state that is Marilla's past. Oh, my.
Yeah. So Marilla is continuing the conversation and continuing the point. I'm not saying she was exactly right, but still, you flew off the handle.
And this is a reasonable, not really a punishment, but a way to make Anne understand
Yeah.
Yeah.
why this is wrong and what you need to do to rectify things. Well, things may never be the same, but you can give the appearance of, hey, sorry.
Yeah.
you know, I will appeal to the fact that you are older and I'm younger, and you know whatever. But this is a really good way to make a child understand why they are wrong.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And no slaps, no
Right.
switches,
Switches.
no paddlings, no canings, no nothing.
Right.
Yep. But I also wonder, and I don't know that Marilla is sensitive to understand this, but arguably the worst punishment Anne could have is going back to somebody who you know,
Right.
insulted her for her red hair and debased herself, if you will, in front of her. Like, whoa.
Yeah.
The idea, the audience that's watching this in its time frame,
Yeah.
I have to imagine the idea of a young child approaching a older woman neighbor and unloading emotionally on them would have been scandalously shocking to the Japanese audience.
Yeah.
Like, what?
And I can just see a 6-year-old girl go look at her mom and say, "So all I have to do is just say I'm sorry, and I can just fly off the handle to anyone I don't like." No.
But
This is
Marilla's
Japan. We will
response,
kill you.
but I mean, Marilla's response feels like it's that same kind of cultural social rebuilding.
Yes. Great point. Yeah.
You know, that you could do, you know, old school style and physically punish her.
Right.
But what would you do in the culture that this is displayed in? You have to go prostrate yourself and apologize and restore and rebalance the entire relationship.
Yeah.
So this is the expectation of you.
Yep.
Like,
Let's call out the rather overactive imagination on Anne.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'll grab my dungeon.
Yeah.
Anne has technically talked back to Marilla, right? She said, I won't take that. Although she said, I'll take anything else. Marilla's response is, okay, then here's the next consequence. Right? Then you have to stay in your room, and I should also point out, this is not, you know, stay in your room and not get fed. Like she'll get dinner and such.
Right.
But still, it's, you know, it's another element of, okay, then now you can't go outside into nature, which you love so much, right? And that's partially punishment, but it's also kind of like, well, I need to know that there's some limitation here to keep you until you finally will make up your mind. But also, even kind of further, Marilla knows, and getting shut up in her room is not a horrible ordeal.
Right.
So that's a, you know, ameliorating aspect. And I appreciate the clarification Marilla points here. It doesn't seem very much like it this evening. Right?
Yes.
She's not saying you're a bad girl. She's just saying your behavior right now is not in keeping with what we expect.
By the way, this when Anne is talking about I'll have to stay here forever, I really half expected this.
she needs a fainting couch for that.
Yeah.
I like the tactful way that Marilla also has helped to focus Anne a little bit more. When we accepted you at Green Gables, you know, we had expectations, and it just didn't seem like it this evening.
Yep.
That's not a threat.
True.
But I think that is a deft reminder to Anne that, you know, they want her here, and there's, you know, certain expectations, and that, you know, think about it, Anne. Really think about this.
Yeah. These are our standards that you agreed to.
Right.
And I want to point out one other thing.
Yeah. Please.
She did not slam the door.
You're right. Yeah.
She was not angry this whole time. She's upset. She is stern. She knows what she wants to get out of Anne in terms of apologies and things of that nature. But there is a level of patience where she is like, okay, we've done the thing. She needs time to stew. My slamming the door because I might be upset isn't going to help anything. So we're just gonna close it and just leave it at that.
To your point, earlier on when she comes in, Anne looks up in surprise and kind of fear, and Marilla has no reaction to that. She's just like, no, we're just going to have this conversation and continue doing that. Very calming influence on Anne.
Yeah.
And to that point, Marilla knocked.
Yeah,
Yes.
good point. Yeah.
She did not go up, throw the door, and be like, "Anne, you little." Nope. She knocked again. She opened the door.
Yeah.
It's like Marilla's got a lot of ability to hold back the rage.
Yeah.
Has Marilla ever raged? I wonder.
I don't think we've seen her. I don't think we've seen her rage so far.
No.
And the commentary in her childhood, she didn't turn around and lay into those two people. She just stood there with her little bonnet, like.
Yep.
Oh, to your point, Brent, there is food.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's
Thank
a
you, Matthew.
softie.
Thank you.
He's a softie.
Also, he's unable to speak to any women, so he can say this because he's never going to interact
Right.
with Rachel Lynn.
Yeah.
For my life. For the rest of my life.
Also,
She's so young to be such a drama queen.
also, it's not, I'm going to stay here all my life. I am prepared to stay here all my life. What's going on here? I suspect Marilla kind of wants to address Anne and wants to, say something to her or talk to her out of it and realizes not going to work.
Yeah.
It's probably also we're starting to see a tiny bit of frustration
Yeah, true.
because Marilla's been this is a reasonable punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All she has to do is go and apologize. Marilla's thought this through. This is
Yeah.
not a harsh punishment. This is not something terrible. Why is Anne not being reasonable? That is something that's completely understandable. And Marilla's just like at the point of you.
Also, Anne has wasted food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's not good either.
not a good place to be in this era. To be
Yeah.
wasting good food.
So Anne's kind of working through the stages of her anger, right? The hot fire of the anger has passed. Now she's feeling shame, and the shame is now the barrier, not the anger.
Yeah.
Right.
Let's kind of call out the parenting here, where on the one hand, I think Matthew just doesn't like conflict, and he'd
Yeah.
rather see all this kind of
Yeah.
but also I think he's going to Anne saying, I think there's something in the back of the mind potentially of saying that Anne has kind of set herself against this thing, this course of action, that Marilla is kind of standing in there. If I come in from the side and say, actually, I think you should do the thing you're supposed to do, that might deflect Anne enough onto the right course of action. She needs somebody else telling her the right thing to do besides Marilla in this
Right.
Right.
situation.
So
Because the
almost
thing,
oh, go ahead.
because I was gonna say, because basically the plan worked. I mean,
Yeah.
Marilla's it's like, here's the punishment. You need a night to think this over, and that's exactly what Anne said. And,
Yeah, you're right.
it was just like, I worked through it, figured it out, and yes, I need to be sorry, but I'm so shameful of this. Now comes the part where you get the good cop, right? And here's it, right?
Yeah.
So Matthew comes in, and he's just like, well, I'm not going to let you off the hook, but, if you could do this for me, this is what I think you should do. Because he says that.
Yeah.
Of course you should do this. Yes, that's exactly right. Apologize is exactly the good word. So, would you do that? You need to do that. So, would you do that for me to help me help you, basically?
Yeah.
And so, you just kind of have that, as you say, coming in from the side and just kind of saying, you know what you need to do now. So, let's just pop you out of this melodrama that you're in and get you on your way.
Well, I'm almost surprised. It's not Matthew's character, but I'm almost surprised. It feels like he would say something akin to, I understand. You can apologize because she is a senior person, and you shouldn't have said that to a senior person. You know what I mean? Sort of deconstruct what happened there to be like, listen, it's not about per se what you said. It's the way that you said it to somebody you should have offered that respect to. But that's not Matthew's character. But it feels like that's somewhere in the background. Like, just bring the peace. Just something happened and just get it going.
Yeah.
It's like
No, you're absolutely right. I think Anne can't sort through her emotions well enough to come up with the right words to get across what she wants to say, and she needs somebody to say that's okay. Don't try to write the Magna Carta here. Just say you're sorry for insulting somebody. That you're
Right.
fine. Yeah. What is Marilla's reaction to Anne being out of her room?
It's
Almost
not complete total shock. It's
Right?
just like,
Yeah.
hey,
She's
there
not.
you
What are
are.
you doing outside of your room? What's going? Well, tell me what. Marilla seems to understand, and you can tell from Anne's body language. Okay, the time has come.
I love the fact that Marilla took the high road on that and didn't say, well, it's about damn time.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? She's just like,
Great point.
okay, fair. Gussy up, let's go.
Yep. It's also smart that she doesn't say, okay, well, I have some things to take care of. You know, we'll get to it. No, we're doing it now.
Yeah, we're gonna rip this Band-Aid off right now and get it done.
Well, also with a child with such deep and wide imagination, you gotta hit this while this kid's on board.
You ready to go? Great, let's go, please.
Yeah, do it now.
this.
Otherwise, Anne will be off in the field somewhere, imagining a kingdom of something or other.
She's not wearing her hat.
That's true. That is kind of unusual. I'm guessing because she's just going over to a neighbor. It's casual enough you wouldn't have to wear a hat. But yeah, that is odd.
Yeah, and this is not your average social visit.
Oh, true. Yeah, I guess.
You know, it's like get Anne to apologize, go back to the farm.
Look at that.
Mm.
Little smile on her face. She's coming to appreciate that this is indeed the right thing for her to do at this point.
Also, she's out in nature again.
That's true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So undoubtedly, there's an element of getting this done gets her back to here, outside. So that's her happy place. So,
According to the book, halfway down the lane, Anne's dejection vanished as if by enchantment. This was satisfactory, or should have been so, but Marilla could not rid herself of the notion that something in her scheme of punishment was going askew.
very true.
Yeah.
Brilliant of Anne to shut up.
Good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, think of the carriage ride back to the orphanage and stuff. Anne just talking and talking and talking. Marilla made a comment, and Anne left it alone. She did not go into any drama or histrionics or any kind of crazy. She just stayed quiet, let Marilla be. Like,
And Marilla, for her part, isn't picking apart Anne. Anne has said, I'm trying to organize my thoughts. Marilla says, okay, I'll let you do that.
yeah.
First off, hilarious scene. Secondly, you could argue there's a little bit here of Anne kind of sticking the knife back in.
Oh, yeah.
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 I am all of these things. But I think on a deeper level, this is, again, Anne kind of saying, if I have to apologize, in a sense, I'm going to apologize my way. I'm going to apologize in the deepest, strongest, most powerful way I can think of to apologize, right? That this is an apology for the history books, right?
Yes.
And it's all she can think of is, okay, then I'm just going to prostrate myself in front of Rachel.
Because
But
after
just her
all,
saying-
she is a theater kid.
Yeah, she sure is.
But just in her saying it, but you're right, it's twisting the knife.
Uh-huh.
Anne, in that moment of, what do you think? What are you looking at? What are you thinking about, Anne? I'm thinking about how to apologize.
Yeah.
So Anne is apologizing for Rachel telling her bad things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not just a simple, okay, I'm going to make a fake apology. I'm so sorry I yelled at you. No, she's like, I'm so sorry that this happened. I flew off the handle because you said this truth to me. You said I was ugly. You said I was terrible. I was freckled and red haired. It's like, that's why Rachel's sitting there. She's like shocked, and you see her kind of her head bows a little. It's like, yes, this small child is apologizing for the terrible things you said to her.
Yeah.
Like, well done, Anne.
Yeah.
How to weaponize an apology.
Yeah. I have to call out the raising of the hands as well.
Laying it on thick.
Man. Wow.
Laying it on thick. Oh my goodness. But she unknowingly said actually the right thing there about her hair.
Yeah,
and
you're
saying,
right.
oh, hey, it could turn into this, which is what Anne has kind of been saying this whole time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I also wonder if there's a certain amount of again, Anne kind of trying to protect herself. She's not quite lashing out, but she is reaching out to to solve this problem in the strongest way she possibly can think of doing so, to protect herself.
Marilla's face. Do you think she knows that Anne just manipulated the crap out of her? Because that's the total feeling I get from this is like, Anne, you really actually didn't apologize. You've just manipulated her into being like nice to you, and that's a little too crafty.
Yeah. There's certainly something in Marilla's expression that indicates she knows that. And also, notice how Anne is looking back to Marilla for approval. Like, did I do it right? And Marilla's kind of like, I don't know if you did.
Yeah.
Marilla's just like, I don't know whether to laugh or to scold you or to do whatever, but sure.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
The superficial thing would be to say, oh yeah, I'm sure it'll be okay. Marilla's saying, it's not important. Just stop worrying about it. It's, your looks don't matter.
At this point, Marilla goes, hang on one second, goes to the side road, just sobs for like 30 seconds. Okay, we're back. Yeah, thank you. Let's go.
Sobs. You're giving a lot for Marilla. I figured she could take a 12 gauge to the chest and shrug it off. You're like,
that's true. But I love how complicated Marilla's expression is in this shot.
Yeah.
She realizes just how much she must have worked her way into Anne's heart for Anne to be willing to do that to her.
Yeah.
It's a big moment for Anne to hold an adult's hand.
Well, and two, Anne has just been flowery over the top. She's so happy at Green Gables, all of the the plants and things and blah blah blah. This is the first time she's ever reached out in a connective kind of way with Marilla to hold her hand, not just sit next to her on the buggy, not just to be in her space, but they're not doing anything, and Anne has approached her and embraced her, and it's like, oh, that shows a connectivity I think Marilla's like, oh wow, I hadn't even recognized this myself.
This is the line from the novel that they're trying to get across. Something warm and pleasant welled up in Marilla's heart at touch of that thin little hand in her own, a throb of the maternity she had missed, perhaps. Its very unaccustomedness and sweetness disturbed her. You can see it in her face.
Yeah. Which, we know just from the living circumstances of her and Matthew, she has a caring function because she has cared for Matthew all these years.
Sure.
So it's just never been a small someone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's just like, so yeah, I could see that touch of the maternal that's different than just caring for someone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So there we are. Episode 7. Yeah. Very self-contained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much more so than we've seen before. Really it's just this.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about how much this shows the evolution of Anne and Marilla and Matthew. That Anne behaved in an inappropriate way and then was punished for it and found her way emotionally to the right spot to be able to apologize. Marilla faced her really first major problem with Anne and handled that with grace. And then Matthew actually interfered a little bit, or intervened in the situation when realizing it wasn't really working, and worked as well.
Yeah. Almost like a functional family moment.
Almost. Amazing. Yeah.
I feel like buying a Hallmark card.
Well, I gotta say, I got a little touch of the Verklempt when Anne held Marilla's hand. I'm like, oh, geez, that's sweet.
Yeah.
That this kid who's gone through so much absolute awful growing up experience, and now she finally has somebody that she can actually hold the hand of and feel close to. It's like, oh,
Yep. It's such a
Well,
small
wait,
moment, but it's important.
yeah,
well, and you think what this is coming out of, which is a moment of Marilla acting like a parent and giving guidance.
You're right.
And Matthew as well. So when you've lived in a life where you were the guidance
Great point.
kids,
Yeah.
and then to have someone else to say, "You're a freaking," I mean, Marilla's not really saying this, but basically, you're a freaking kid. You don't need to do this. Let me do this. Let me be the parent here.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
That's a great point. I hadn't even thought about that. That Anne can now feel comfortable that Marilla can parent for her. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Well, it also makes me wonder when Anne is going on. So, oh, Miss Lynn. Oh, this. Forgive me, this ugly child. When Marilla's standing there, I feel like there should be some little ticker tape running through her head, being like, okay, I know Anne's very imaginative. She's been in terrible spots where the only friend she had essentially was her own imagination. But the ability to be this over the top in an apology and to be so, not fake, but to be so obviously over the top in an apology. What terrible things happened where she had to learn this kind of apology?
Yeah.
It's not just being alone by yourself and looking at your reflection in the cupboard. Is this something that you've learned to be this humbling in front of an authority figure that I'm not going to interfere with Anne's doing this, but it's really got me thinking. The gears are turning of like, oh, this is horrible. It's horrible that someone would learn this skill.
Here's what she's thinking in the book.
Okay.
There was no mistaking her sincerity. It breathed in every tone of her voice, speaking of Anne. Both Marilla and Mrs. Lynde recognized its unmistakable ring. But the former understood in dismay that Anne was actually enjoying her valley of humiliation, was reveling in the thoroughness of her abasement. Where was the wholesome punishment upon which she, Marilla, had plumed herself? Anne had turned it into a species of positive pleasure.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a certain absolute submissiveness in this that, like, to your point, is kind of turning it on its head to the other person. Oh, I am just a lowly worm, and just kind of reveling in that, which I think Marilla is absolutely aware is happening.
Which is, again, it's an art. Anne's turned that into an art. By whatever means were necessary for her to get this far in life.
I just say, next line, good Mrs. Lynde, not being overburdened with perception, did not see this.
She's saying she was simple?
How dare you, John?
Yeah, I know. It's terrible. I should
was
apologize
touched.
to her.
Yeah. But yeah, what did you think what do you think of this event here in the story? Like why do you think this happens now in the story?
Well, it feels like this is our we've accepted Anne at Green Gables. Now this is parenting begins.
Okay.
There is a conflict.
Right.
Marilla and Matthew have to deal with a conflict with Anne. This new person that they've said you're staying, and how do they resolve it? And this is, we've watched all the steps. We've seen how Marilla responds to things. We see how Matthew comes in and is a peacemaker that kind of gets the two immovable objects to sort of move again. And then now we can see this will help. Anne has approached Marilla now as a personal holding hands, walking with her. So it is not just sort of running around and talking about the glories of outside. She's actually engaging with Marilla as a personal connection. So now we get to see the relationships of these three people grow. And I'm assuming this is that, or not assuming, it feels like this is, we've established that everything is now the way it is, and now we grow. We grow from this point together as a family. To me, that's what it feels like.
Yeah. Steve?
Yeah, it's definitely a benchmark episode because when on the one hand leading up to this, there was definitely a thing of we're just bringing on a kid, a boy, to do the farm work to help us out with this because we're getting old. We have no experience with children. Mrs. Lynn has made this perfectly clear at the outset, and and then the whole thing, the mix up with Anne and being a girl instead of the boy that they asked for. And then Mrs. Lynn also going on about how like, oh, she's going to poison the well and all this nonsense. And so this is the moment for Matthew and Marilla to prove basically to the viewer slash reader, actually we can do this because we kind of have to, but we can do this. And this is a point where Anne does something that, yes, kids have temper tantrums and they say things, stupid little things that, 10 minutes later they'll come back and they'll go, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. But this is Anne.
Yeah.
You're a kid Anne, right? So this, we're going like thermonuclear war here.
Yep.
And she just and no amount of we know what her situation was. And Marilla does explain saying, hey, we have to make certain allowances for this. Yeah. But, it's still more than it should have been. It was way over the top. And so this was, one of you said this earlier, this is like the first real challenge of them dealing with Anne in a way where nobody's stepping on eggshells anymore.
True.
Right. No one's going, oh, what do I do not to tick off the little kid? It's more along the lines of going, no, I accepted this kid in my life and I want to take care of this kid, but we can't have this. And being a parent and then proving to the reader and the viewer that this can be done. And then to your point, John, now we can go on with the rest of the story of here's the family unit. How do they get together? How do they resolve things in the future? Now that we've set the baseline of kid parental authorities, not parents per se, but with that authority.
I agree with all of that. There's actually another layer to this, which is not clear at this point. One of the last scenes in the story, both book and anime series, is with Marilla, Anne, and Rachel. And the three of them all sitting down and interacting with each other. And it kind of bookends this scene, showing how the three of them have changed over the course of the novel. Like how, their relationships have evolved over the course of the novel. And so I think it makes this interesting because it's almost like everything up to this point has been prologue. And this is, the beginning of Anne's life in Green Gables proper, and everything goes on from there, to your guys' point.
Well, as Anne said, it feels like she's coming home.
Yeah.
And it's like, finally, now we have a home and we can move forward from this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, so I can take that bayonet out now. I can fix the face after bringing the 2x4.
Yes, absolutely. It feels good at episode 7.
Yeah.
To finally feel like we're there. All right, that is episode 7 of Anne of Green Gables. Yay. Welcome back. I hope you found that useful. Good news, Bunny and her parents just showed up. She's, that family has been here in the past, and they said they plan to stay for a while, and they're paying very generously too. Bunny even brought me a copy of a manga for the manga library. It's very sweet, sometimes things work out. Anyway, thanks for watching. Until next time, watch more anime.